Hey, good afternoon or good morning if you're doing it in the morning. This is lesson 4 of your Shang Dynasty lessons. So if you'd like to start by getting yourself a pencil or a pen and some paper and writing today's date, which is Monday the 28th of June 2021. And then if you write down the question, which is what did the Shang people believe? So if you just pause the video whilst you're doing that, and then when you're ready you can hit play and we'll start the lesson. So as always with these history lessons, we've got some retrieval practice from things that we have done over the past couple of weeks. So you do not need to write the question for this. What I'd like you to do is just write the question number and then your answer. So question number 1, who was the first emperor of the Shang dynasty? A. Cheng Tang, B. Ji, or C. Shang Dai? So just write A, B or C. I'll read all the questions out and then you can pause it at the end so that you can answer them. So question 2, in what year did the Shang dynasty end? Question 3, what was the name of the river that the Shang civilization was situated on? And this needs to have capital letters because it's a proper noun, it's the actual name of the river. Question 4, what was used as money or for trading during the Shang dynasty? So we've got A, oracle bones, B, cowrie shells, C, bronze, or D, jade. Again, all you have to do on that is write A, B, C or D. And then question 5, which social class would a priest belong to? Would he belong to A, the noble class, or B, the working class? Okay, so with that, I would like you please to pause the video, write your answers, and then press play when you are done. So here's the answers, so you can tick them or correct them. So question 1, who was the first emperor of the Shang dynasty? The answer was A, Cheng Tang. Question 2, in what year did the Shang dynasty end? That was 1046 BCE. Question 3, what was the name of the river? I think we've discussed this quite a bit, so you should have all got this one right. The answer was the Yellow River with capital letters for the Yellow River. Question 4, what was used as money during the Shang dynasty? So the answer was B, cowrie shells. And question 5, which social class would a priest belong to? He would belong to the noble class. Okay, so tick those or correct those, pause it if you need to, and then press play when you're ready to carry on. Okay, so this lesson we've got some key vocabulary that we're going to be looking at. So we've got polytheistic, which is the belief that there are many gods. So people who are polytheistic will not just worship or pray to one god, they will worship many gods. Ancestors, so that's the people in your family who have already died, like your great-great-grandmother. It can be, ancestors can go back hundreds and hundreds of years, so it can go to like your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, or it could just go back maybe 20-30 years to your great-great-grandparents. Okay, so it's like your mum's mum, and so on. Then we've got a deity, which is a god or a goddess, so that is the people who worship, this is who they worship. They worship the deity or the god or goddess. Then we've got a sacrifice. So this is the act of killing an animal or a person or giving up a possession to a god. So they will kind of sacrifice something to prove that they, to prove their devotion to their god and ask for maybe something in return. And then the divination is trying to predict the future by asking the spirits or the gods. So they try, and if they've got a question that they want answering about what's going to happen in the future, they will ask the spirits or the gods and they will try and predict and give them an answer. Okay. So religion in the Shang dynasty. Now in here, I'm going to read this out. There are quite a few strange words that we may not have come across before. So I'll read it to you. I apologise if my pronunciation is not spot on, but I have been practicing. So the Shang dynasty existed before any of the major religions that we see in China today, which are Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. Confucius wasn't born until 551 BCE. The Buddha was born shortly after, while Jesus wouldn't be born for another 1,600 years after the Shang dynasty began. However, the Shang were religious people. They were polytheistic, which means they worshipped lots of different gods. These gods were all controlled by the supreme deity, the Shang Dai, which you can see there on the picture. People made sacrifices to the gods. This meant giving an object, killing an animal, or sometimes even a person to try and please the gods. Emperor Tang was supposed to have offered himself as a sacrifice to bring rains to the Shang people. Sacrifices would be made at an altar in a temple. So when it says that about Emperor Tang, it says that he offered himself up to bring rains to the Shang people. Now basically what had happened was that there had been a drought, there'd been no rain for a long period of time. So for his people, it is believed that he offered himself up, so offered up his life, so that there would be rain brought to end the drought for the people, because they needed rain for things like for the crops to grow and for water and things like that. So he was basically sacrificing himself so that his people would be able to live. Okay? So, first task then. Question 1, it says list all the religions that you know about here. The first one is done for you. So it might be religions that we've studied in class, it might be ones that you've heard of, or it might be a religion that yourself and your family follow. So just pause the video and see how many different religions you can come up with. And then I'll list a few on the next slide. Okay, so you should now have listed some religions. So the list that I'm going to give you is by no means, it is nowhere near all the religions in the world. There's loads of different religions, but these are some of the most popular ones and ones that you may have heard of. So we've got Islam, Sikhism, Buddhism, Hinduism and Judaism. Okay, you might have other ones on your list, which is absolutely fine. So we've got a picture of this person again. So this is a portrait of Shang Di or Shang Dai. I think it is Shang Di. Shang Di literally means the heavenly ruler. People would make sacrifices to Shang Di by killing animals at the altar of a temple. The ancient Chinese believed Shang Di created the universe. Shang Di was the supreme deity. Now we already learned that deity means god or goddess. Supreme means kind of the most important one. It's like the best of the best. So if he was the supreme deity, it means he was the best god that there was, the kind of, you couldn't get any higher, you couldn't get any better than him. And it says there as well that they believed that he created the universe. Okay? So I want you to complete this sentence. It's quite a simple one. I've just said it on the previous slide. Shang Di was what? He was the something something. So pause the video if you need to. It doesn't matter about spelling. And then when you're done, press play. Okay, so your answers should have been Shang Di was the supreme deity. Now I did say it didn't matter about spelling, but it would be useful if you could write the correct spelling. So if you've spelled it incorrectly, can you just correct it for me, please? And then we'll move on. So looking at the tombs then, now in my class we discussed the tombs. The tombs are the burial places, much like if you've studied ancient Egypt. So the burial places nowadays, it's normally just quite a small burial place and you go in a coffin, which is basically the size or not much bigger than the size of the person. Whereas in those days, people would be buried in a tomb, which was a much bigger place, almost like the size of a room. And in that room, they would be buried with their belongings because they believed that once people died, that was just the end of this life, but that there was another life after that, and that they would need their belongings and their things with them, and they called that the afterlife. Okay, so let's just read a little bit about that. So the orange boxes then. It says worshipping ancestors was important for the Shang people. So the ancestors, like we said before, are people in their families that have died before them. Tombs from the Shang dynasty include objects that they would need in the afterlife. The ancient Chinese believed that they could communicate with their ancestors' spirits. And then underneath the picture it says, the Shang people also worshipped their ancestors and believed that their spirits lived on after death. They believed that they could communicate with the gods through their ancestors' spirits, who had joined the gods in the afterlife. Tombs have been discovered with lots of possessions for the person to use in the afterlife, just like the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Respect for elders and ancestors is still an important belief of many Chinese people today. And it says here, the tomb of Fu Hao gives us clues about what the Shang people believed. So that's Fu Hao's tomb there, and that has given us lots of clues and an insight into what life was like. So archaeologists have discovered this, and it's been able to really kind of inform us what life was like. So here we have an oracle bone, which we've discussed in class, and we've spent some time looking at the kind of writing or markings that were on it, and we did some of our own. And then you can see there like a circle that's got little bits in, and it says there that this pit in Anyang, the capital of the Shang dynasty, was found with hundreds of oracle bones. There was lots and lots of the oracle bones in there, and that again was able to provide us with lots of information about the kind of thing that was on them and the kind of symbols and things like that they used. So it says priests in the Shang dynasty, along with the emperor, would carve questions onto the bones using a sharp tool. So the type of questions they asked were things like, should they go to war with an enemy? How much rain will fall this year? Will the royal family be successful? Where should they plant their crops? So it was kind of things that they wanted to know to help them with their future. So it was a way of kind of fortune telling, if you like. So after they'd written the question, the priests would take a very hot metal rod and place it into a hole in the bone. This would make it crack, and the priest would try and divine, so that means work out or figure out what the crack meant. This gave them an answer. So as they put it in, it'd make a crack, and the priests believed that this crack would then give them the answer that they were looking for. Luckily for us, they would also write what really happened, for example, whether they did win the battle or got a new emperor. And this is how we know so much about the Shang dynasty today. Okay, so it's been recorded. So when the archaeologists have found this information, they've also found out what happened, which has been great for us because it's been able to give us lots of information. A lot of what we know about the Shang comes from the writing found on oracle bones. These are sometimes called dragon bones, but they were actually usually the shoulder blade, so like this backbone of an ox, which is kind of like a large cow. Some Chinese people believe that if you grind down the bones, it can be used as medicine. In 1899, a university professor in Beijing was sick with malaria. Before grinding up the bones, he noticed ancient writing on them. And then it says, since then, over 50,000 oracle bone parts, and then that bit's covered up with my face, but it says, have been found and studied. Okay, so since then, they found over 50,000 oracle bones, which they've been able to look at and provide this information that we're learning today, which is good. So if you were to write a question on an oracle bone, what would your question be? So maybe come up with 2 or 3. So if I was going to come up with a question, I think I would ask, will England win the Euros? Or I might ask, will we have a heat wave this summer? Or will I win the lottery? That's a good one. So see if you can come up with 3 questions that you would like to ask. So again, the questions that they used were things like, should they go to war with an enemy? How much rain will fall this year? Will the royal family be successful? And where should they plant their crops? So pause the video, write your 3 questions, and then press play. Okay, and then the last question for today, I think it's the last one anyway. When did people first realise that oracle bones contained ancient writing from the Shang dynasty? So they'd been discovered before this date, but when did they realise that they actually contained bits of writing on? Okay, if you do need to rewind, it was on the previous slide. So you can just write your answer down for this one. You don't need to write the question, just write question 4 and then write your answer. And then pause the video, and when you're ready, I will reveal the answer. So the answer is C, 1899. Okay, so there is also a link there at the bottom. I know some of you went on BBC Bite Size the other day, but I think this has got some more videos that you can have a look at, and maybe a different quiz that you can have a look at. So I will post this link as well onto Class Dojo, so if you want to have a look and find out further information, you can do. Also, if any of you would like to, I'm sure if you Google it, you can find out what some of the symbols mean, and you could have another go at writing one of the stories that we did in class where you use the symbols from the Shang dynasty to write a little story. If you remember, we did that a few weeks ago. That'd be nice to see if you've got time. Okay, don't forget to upload a picture of your work onto Class Dojo, and thanks very much for joining me.